I gained 200 feet of max D in less than 4 months and threw a max weight destroyer 740 feet at 82 miles an hour. Since then, I've had many people ask me for my strength and conditioning methodology, as well as my approach to backhand form. This will be a multi-part series where I outline the things that help me most and that I think will help you just as much. Hey everyone, hope you guys are still doing well. This is going to be part 3 of the tutorial series. In this one, I'm going to be going through the warm-up that I do at home before I go out to the field or the course and do any kind of throwing. And I like to think about these sort of preparatory warm-ups as something to accomplish a couple goals. The first of which is to physically prepare the actual physical tissues in our body that are going to be used. So whether it's the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the bones, the joints, getting those things physically prepared to perform at their highest and also to minimize injury risk, but also to neurologically activate the muscles that we're going to want to have full access to fire when we're doing the athletic movement we're going to be doing. So a lot of the warm-up exercises are going to help with that. And also tertiarily, it's a secondary goal, but it also is a nice added benefit of this warm-up routine, is going to be that it improves our flexibility, especially in a dynamic nature, where it's going to improve our ability to get into positions, lengthen positions while moving, which also further enhances performance and minimizes injury risk. And sadly, this is going to be the last part of the tutorial series, so it's going to be the third and final part. I thought a lot about doing a video on flexibility and also on form. The flexibility one is really tricky because everyone is so individual with their bodily needs, especially with my coaching experience in person and online with helping people. I much prefer to look at an individual's strengths and weaknesses and come up with a way to improve flexibility based off of that. So it's hard for me to be ethical and make a video that's going to, one, respect people's time by giving out all the exercises, and two, get the most out of their time, given the differences in how we're built. And then for the form video, I'm just going to make that an entirely separate series because it's something that's so in-depth, and especially with the online coaching I've been doing, helping people with their backhand form, I really much prefer to do that more on an individual basis. So when I do make an entire series or some kind of technique system of sorts for that, it's going to have to be a lot more in-depth. So I don't want to have to cram that into just one video in this series because that won't do it justice. So this will be the final part. And also I'm going to be starting a new sort of fieldwork vlog type series like the Road to 700, where I'm going to be pushing, trying to push my body to the limits and see what I'm capable of, and potentially moving into uncharted territory with what human beings have done with discs. So I'm super excited about that. Be on the lookout for a little bit of a teaser or like a trailer of sorts for that pretty soon here. Really excited to get going on that, so stay tuned. And before I start all the tutorials for the warm-up exercises, I want to mention my coaching business because of course I got to get my obligatory shameless plug in here before the video goes. But if you guys want any help with individualized form coaching, you want to take your backhand to the next level, or you want to get the most out of your body and mind physically or mentally for daily life or general fitness, I do all those things and I love doing it and I love helping people. So I'll put my email on the screen right now, nick.crush.fitness@gmail.com. Please do not feel bad reaching out to me over that. I love getting back and trying to help people out. So there's not going to be an outro for this video, but before I go into the voiceover with all the screen recordings, I want to mention that this warm-up, I use this before I go out to the field. But once I get to the field or get to the course, I still like to do a step-up progression of my throwing progressions. And if you're out there with a partner, the best way to do it, in my mind, is to just play catch with them, because that's what's going to give you the most clean spin and high spin rates as you progress up from 50 feet up to 200 or whatever is comfortable for you. And being able to have a human being as a target really helps us find some natural athleticism. I really like it as an environmental constraint to help us naturally find our best so-called frisbee throwing technique, which essentially the second half of a disc golf backhand is just, we're still throwing a frisbee at the end of the day, just with a ton of power. So I love playing catch and just backing up as we go and throwing it to our partner. If you don't have a partner, I really like to start out at around 50 feet and just do very relaxed upshot style approach shots, and then I usually back up 50-ish feet. And I'll throw around 20 to 25 discs as I work my way up to 200 or 250, depending on what the goal is for the day. But the numbers don't matter too much. The main moral of the story is just to have some kind of actual progression for throwing so that we can bridge this at-home physical and mental warm-up with the actual sport that we're going to be doing, which is disc golf, throwing the disc. And that will kind of help bridge that final gap before we want to get into our max power throws or our full power throws. So I wanted to mention that. And without further ado, I'll let you guys go and we'll get into the tutorials. So appreciate you guys stopping by, and I hope you take care and enjoy the video. Okay, so exercise 1 here is going to be free hangs from the pull-up bar. So I have one of these doorway pull-up bars that I can use at home. If you don't have access to one of these, it's okay to just skip this exercise. It's more of a preparation exercise to get us ready for the rest of it, so it's a nice bonus. But what it's going to do is, for one, it's going to warm up our thumbs and index finger, middle fingers, all these major gripping finger and hand muscles that we're going to be using for disc golf. But also, it is going to, most importantly, expand our shoulders, rib cage, and spine joints. Especially since they can get compressed from lifting weights and also from daily life. Helping to expand these joints will increase their freedom of movement for the rest of our warm-up and also for the throwing that we're going to be doing later. So, my goal of this exercise is to only have my hands and fingers in tension and finding relaxation in the rest of my body. So I'm basically just falling where gravity is taking me. My feet are touching the ground because it's not high enough, but the only thing in tension really is my hands and fingers. And I'm gonna hold this for 30 seconds. My goal is to take in deep breaths down into my abdomen, my lower abdomen, and then exhale as slowly as possible. And I'm trying to find the most relaxed, deep inhales and longest exhales through my nose I can possibly find, which is going to calm my nervous system, but also help to expand my rib cage and my shoulders and my spine even further. And this is going to be a 30-second duration. You can adjust that accordingly to reasonable levels of grip fatigue. We want to have a little bit of a warm-up, but we don't want to absolutely gas our forearms and fingers to where they're extremely fatigued before we go and throw. Okay, exercise 2 is going to be band pull-aparts. So I'm using a neutral grip, and in my case, a green resistance band. The red band is going to be a step down below this in weight, and then the yellow band is going to be another step down below that. So adjust that accordingly to what your body will tolerate and what feels comfortable. And all I'm doing is I am locking out my elbows and wrists, and I am pulling with my scapulas and rear deltoids for 20 repetitions, and here I rotate to the side so you can kind of see what it looks like from the side. I want to have as long a range of motion as possible and control in a very safe manner with my shoulders and back muscles. And this is going to help to get our rear delts warmed up as well as moving our shoulder through a range of motion, starting to get some synovial fluid in there before the rest of the warm-up. Okay, exercise number 3 is going to be neck circles. So this is a bit of a functional range conditioning or controlled articulation of the joint. And this is essentially where I'm spending 30 seconds in each direction. So when I start off to the right side and do a full revolution, I'm going to take around 30 seconds to complete it. And this is going to help loosen up the neck muscles, get some activation into them because I am controlling the motion with the agonist side of my neck. In this case, it's more the left side, contracting as the right side expands. And then I'm also relaxing and moving through the full range of motion so that my mechanoreceptors in my cervical spine joints can provide some good feedback, and I can prepare my nervous system for essentially the head whipping that happens during the reach back and follow through on the backhand. So this will help prevent neck injuries. And now I'm going back forth to the other direction and spending another 30 seconds or so moving through a full range of motion, feeling a nice stretch and really relaxing as I do it. Okay, exercise number 4, we're back to another band pull apart, but this one is going to be moving our wrist, elbow, and shoulder through the range of motion at the same time. So we'll be warming up all the muscles and tendons across our hand, wrist, forearm, all the way through the back of the elbow, and then even through the rotator cuff. And this is going to help prevent a lot of the common injuries in disc golf with golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, all sorts of tendonitis in the forearm muscles, the elbow muscles, as well as warming up the external rotator a little bit, because that actually does get loaded pretty heavily, especially once we reach the power pocket and go through the finish. There is an actual rotational aspect to how the humerus moves in the shoulder joint, especially under high stress when the disc starts to get really heavy from all the centripetal acceleration. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up, I'm gripping the band pretty close together, maybe around chest to nipple width here, and the band is coming out the bottom of my hand. I have a vertical hand, like I'm holding maybe a coffee mug or something like that. And I'm starting out with the band coming out the bottom. This is going to be the easier progression to start off with. And my wrists are curled inward, my elbows are fully bent, and my humerus or upper arm is kind of back. And as I pull the band out, I'm going into a flexed outward wrist position. So I'm pulling the band out with my wrists. And as I do that, I'm maintaining contraction across my triceps and the back of my shoulder, so that when I pull the band out, it doesn't end up extremely far out and very high stress. But I'm still having an eccentric and concentric contraction of the tricep, rear delt, and the forearm and wrist muscles all at the same time. So they're kind of working in unison together. And there's a little bit of rotation of my upper arm that's perfectly fine. So I like to do 12 to 14 reps with the band on the bottom of the hand here. So you can see I'm really pulling my wrists out, but I'm allowing the elbows to come in a controlled, muscularly controlled fashion. And then for the next 12 to 14 reps, I like to put the band coming out the top of the hand, but I have the same grip set up. And then you can see I'm pulling outwards with my hand and wrist at this position, and then I'm allowing my wrist to flex inward at this inward position. And I'm maintaining controlled contraction of the tricep and shoulder to make sure I'm controlling the movement across the full range of motion. Okay, exercise number 5 is going to be neck lookovers. This is going to be our second and final neck specific warm-up. So in this one, I'm just standing upright with good posture, and I'm slowly looking as far as I can to the side. I'm actually also looking with my eyes to try to look over my shoulder. It shouldn't be uncomfortable, but you should feel a nice stretch as you pull into that position, and you can go a little bit further each time. I go up to 20 reps here, so it's going to be 10 reps per side for 20 reps total. And this will help warm up our rotational neck muscles, get some more lubrication in the joints, and also getting the eye muscles warmed up and stretched out, because those need to look over, especially when we reach back on the backhand. We don't want the first time that we stress our eye muscles laterally to be when we're ripping a full power shot at the course or at the field. So this will help prepare those as well as the neck. Okay, exercise number 6 is going to be bird dogs. So in this one, I'm on my hands and knees with a nice, strong, neutral to slightly extended spine. And you can do this with your palms on the ground or on the fists. I'm on the fists because I often do this with bands, and I'm just used to holding the band like that. But if you want to use it with your palms flat to the ground, that's perfectly fine as well. And this movement is going to essentially fire our big hip muscles, the glutes, fire the multifidus, which is the spinal stabilizer muscle that flanks the spine and helps to control the vertebrae and protect us from injuries, as well as the lat and the rear shoulder muscles are all going to be used to extend the humerus upward and extend the foot out behind us. And the way to initiate this movement is going to be opposite arm, opposite leg. So on my first repetition, my left leg is shooting back and my right arm is shooting forward. And my goal is to keep a very stiff, stabilized back while my arms and legs move. So you can see my back really doesn't move much at all as I do this. So I'm using my hip and my shoulder to move my limbs while keeping my back nice and stable. And I'm balancing essentially on the opposite knee and opposite hand as I do that, which is really where a lot of the value comes into this exercise, as well as just activating our glutes for hip extension, which is, you can never have too much of that, so that's always nice. So we're alternating between the right arm, left leg, and left arm, right leg. And my goal is to feel like I'm punching this hand as far in front of me as possible and punching this foot as far behind me as possible when I reach this top position. And I want to hold that with a very strong contraction for just a pause at the top to make sure that I'm fully activating those muscles. So you can see slight pause. And this is going to be 10 reps per side for 20 repetitions total. And I'll just kind of let this play out a little bit so you can kind of see how the back stays stable, but the hip and the arm are firing forward and fully extending with a pause at the top. Okay, exercise number 7 is going to be hip extension biased clamshells. So I want to say thank you to my good friend Tyler Breitenstein. He's a buddy of mine in real life, and he's also a master's degree and certified trainer, and he's really smart with a lot of these exercises for glute and back activation, and his clients have had great results. So I basically, he told me about this and I started doing it and I fell in love with the exercise, so now it's a part of my warm-up. And I'll put his Twitter up on the screen so you guys can go follow him, because he's a football coach and also a trainer, and he's going to be posting all sorts of cool stuff on there. So thanks again, Tyler, for showing me this, because honestly it's helped me with a lot of my injury baggage that I've had from over the years, and I think it's going to be super useful for a lot of you guys to get the glutes firing, especially the medial glute, or excuse me, the glute medius or the lateral glute, as well as the obliques and some of the stronger trunk muscles to help stabilize the spine as we move up and extend forward. So what we're doing with this exercise is I'm setting up with my arm straight down, forearm is flat on the ground, and I have my downwards thigh flat. If we were to look from the top, my thigh is probably 45 degrees roughly forward of my spine. So if you're looking down from above and my spine is going straight this way, my legs are about 45 degrees, my thigh is about 45 degrees in front. And then my knee is bent, around 90 degrees or so. Find a comfortable position for yourself. And what we're gonna do, so I'm working on my right side first, is I'm using my hips and glutes to extend upwards vertically. So I'll just draw this real quick. We're going upwards, but I'm also extending kind of towards us, which it's hard to draw an arrow, but I'm extending towards the camera. So you can kind of see I'm using basically my butt to extend my body upwards and forwards into full extension, full hip extension. And I'm also extending this top side hip in such a way that my knees open up like a clamshell. So I'm driving from the glutes and I'm extending as hard as I can at the top, and I'm holding that full contraction at the top for a pause to make sure I really, really feel a strong contraction in the hips. And I'm doing 10 repetitions per side here with body weight. So I just did the, my right side, and now I'm moving over to the left side here. And I'm gonna go back into it and do another 10 reps. So I'm really feeling a strong glute contraction in both legs, and I'm shooting upwards and forward and holding that pause at the top for just a moment. Okay, so exercise number 8 is going to be the extreme isometric lunge. This is probably hands down my favorite single exercise for sprinting and general movement sports. So I started implementing it in my disc golf warm-up because I just love the benefits it has for hip flexor mobility and length, as well as gluteal activation, and also warming up, especially the upper hamstring when it's in deep hip flexion, stretching out the foot, getting the toes and big toe especially working correctly, and then also driving some neurological efficiency, because we are going to be under some physical distress to hold the position even for 30 seconds. So practicing calm, deep breathing with long exhales through the nose is going to enhance our neurological efficiency, which is going to be great for maximum performance, but also managing stress when we're playing rounds on the course. So what I do here is I set up into a normal lunge position. I pull myself in deep and find a good balance where I'm on both feet. And then the big difference between a normal lunge and this is I'm going to raise the heel off the ground in a moment here. There we go. So the heel's up. So now my weight is on my ball of my front foot and toes. And then my rear foot is up on the toes, which are kind of stretched out. Especially the big toe, you'll feel a stretch when you start doing these. And once I get into this position, I want to get my chest very upright. So I'm not cheating and leaning my body forwards. I have a very nice upright chest. Think big chest, chin up, upright spine. And once I hit this position, that's when the clock starts. So I'm doing 30 seconds here for my warm-ups. So 30 seconds for right leg forward, and then 30 seconds for left leg forward. Once I get in position, the main thing I'm focusing on is I want to pull my, let me get this red here. I want to pull my front foot in and my back foot in. So I'm actually pulling my feet together. Sorry about that, that's the wrong arrowhead design here. I'm pulling my feet together and I'm pulling my knees apart. And what that does is it activates the hips both on the back and the front to stretch out the hip flexor and to drive hip extension. It also lights up this front hamstring with this vertical shin position. And mainly the hip flexor stretch will feel pretty strong. You'll feel a strong stretch on your back foot and potentially fatigue in the front foot as well as you fight to pull your feet together and pull your knees apart as you pull your body down deeper into the lunge. And I hold this for 30 seconds. My goal is to not have my posture breakdown and also to pull deep breaths into my abdomen and exhale nice and slowly to try to stay as relaxed as possible as I start to feel the burn. And I'm definitely hurting a little bit inside here. You can't see it on my face, but I've been doing these for years now and they still are not easy. So it's okay to be a little bit fatigued on them as long as we're not absolutely burning out our muscles with lactate. So I'd start out with 20 to 30 second holds per side. That should be plenty if you execute the exercise correctly. Okay, so exercise 9 is going to be a dorsiflexed foot iso. So this one is going to help to loosen up our soleus and Achilles, get some elasticity into the Achilles tendon, but also activate all the foot muscles and the toes and the foot, because we're going to be using those for balance. And it's also going to kind of neurally activate our balance system, which is great because when we're throwing shots in disc golf, we have to have extremely good dynamic balance. So starting out with a little bit of a static balance exercise is a nice stepping stone. So definitely some physical and neurological benefits to doing this in our warm-up. So what I do here is I'm on a slant board. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a 2x4. Anything that's going to keep your heel off the ground and keep you on the balls of your foot and your toes. So 2x4s work fine, anything you can elevate your heel with. And then what I do is I go into a slight knee bend here, so slight to medium knee bend. And then I drop myself down into essentially as low as my heel will go. So my calf is in a full stretch here, and I'm all the way at the bottom, maximum dorsiflexion, which basically just means that my toes are as close to my shin as they can possibly be. That's what dorsiflexion is when we pull the toes up, essentially. So, toes and foot. And once I get in this balanced position, I'm going to hold this for 30 seconds per side. My goal here is to feel a connection mentally between my foot, my glute, and my rib cage. And that's going to help make sure that I'm using this full chain effectively. I'm using a foot glute contraction, which is always good in sports. And then I'm trying to stay as balanced as possible. You'll feel your toes and the balls of your foot working overtime because there's going to be, you can see right here, I kind of struggle for balance. But I'm trying to stay relaxed and composed as I'm in this balanced position. And then that's going to be 30 seconds per side. So here I go over to the left side. So again, if you're having a hard time kind of feeling a good sensation, you can just mentally connect your foot to your glute to your rib cage. And that's going to help you stay stacked. And then that way your foot and natural balancing system can do their job to keep you balanced in this stretch position. Okay, exercise 10 is going to be a simple wall sit iso. This one's going to get a little bit of blood into our quads and also get our quadricep tendon and patellar tendon nice and elastic before we go and plant really hard and brace really hard during our backhand throws. So I'm just dropping into a position somewhere between 45-degree thigh angle and 90-degree thigh angle. So pretty close to parallel, doesn't have to be super deep. And I'm holding this position for 30 seconds. Again, I want to cue a mental connection between my feet, my glutes, and my rib cage, which will keep me nice and stacked and stable. And just holding this for 30 seconds. Kind of go by what feels good for your body. We want to feel a little bit of burn is okay. We just don't want to be poisoning our muscles with an excessive amount of lactate. So if it starts to really, really hurt and you can't get to the time you're trying to get to, just cut it off there and it's probably plenty to get that elasticity and blood flow that we're looking for here. Okay, exercise 11 is going to be truncated hip 90-90. Sorry about the crotch shot here. I thought it was probably the only angle I could really show what I wanted to show as far as what the joints are doing and what the legs are doing. So I'm doing a truncated hip 90-90 because I want to get as much exposure to the femur joint and hip going through internal rotation as possible in as little time as possible, since this is going to be potentially a large limiting factor for how we plant and how we move through our footwork and brace with the X step and backhand throw. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting up, almost sitting upright, lean back a little bit with my hands just behind my butt on both sides, and then my heels are on the ground, out in front and slightly out to the side. And what I'm doing is I'm locking my foot into dorsiflexion, so I'm basically feel myself contracting my toes and foot upwards towards my shin. This is going to help to fire the tibial and fibula muscles, which will help kind of protect our meniscus as we go through any twisting motion through the knee. So as a general rule of thumb, like having forced dorsiflexion can help protect the meniscus. So I like to do that when I'm doing anything that's going to put torque through the knee. And then as I drop in, I'm basically dropping my knee in and trying to get my knee to the ground. Obviously not pushing it too far to where it's uncomfortable and hurts, but I also want to progressively move my knee closer and closer to the ground, which is getting me into deeper internal rotation. And as I do this movement, I want to maintain, I keep beating on a dead horse with it, but I want to maintain a mental connection from my feet to my hips to my rib cage. And this is going to help keep the SI joint, the pelvis, and the spine stable, as well as making sure we're using our big hip muscles to move through rotation on this exercise. So again, I'm pulling this knee down to the ground, back and forth. I like to do a little double bounce when I'm down there to feel a little bit more hip activation and range of motion. And I'm doing 40 reps total, which is going to be 20 reps per side. Okay, exercise 12 is going to be rotated arm swings. So this one is going to be nice for getting a stretch across our pecs, the back of our shoulders, and even our rotator cuff, but in a nice dynamic fashion that's going to loosen them up and also get the tendons a little bit more elastic. So this can help prevent injuries to the shoulder and any of the upper body muscles like the pec or the rear delt. And this is going to be one of the more final upper body warm-ups that's a little bit more similar to an actual throwing motion now that we're pretty warmed up and pretty loose and activated at this point. So I like to do my first 10 to 12 reps with my palms to the sky. So I'm supinating my hand, palms to the sky, and I'm allowing my elbow to also rotate with it. This is going to bring me into external rotation at the shoulder joint, which is going to be a little bit safer for the external rotators and the rotator cuff because they're in a shorter position. So that's why I like to do the palms to the sky, elbow underneath the arm as my first progression on this exercise. And that's where I'm going to do my first 10 to 12 reps. And I'm also starting low, so I'm keeping a nice loose bounce all the way around into a hug and then straight to the back. And I'm bouncing with momentum here, but also using my shoulders to drive the movement. And as I progress through the reps, I'm actually moving my hands higher and higher, which is going to activate my shoulders a little bit more aggressively. And that's how I work up, and then I'm going to end up probably around chin height with my arms on the last couple. And then for the second half, where I'm going to do another 10 to 12 reps, I'm going into pronation and internal rotation. So this one's going to be kind of like thumbs downwards, and elbows are going to be a little bit more out, which is going to stretch out the external rotators of the rotator cuff a little more. But we should be warm and prepared to put ourselves in that position, and this will be a nice stepping stone once we get closer to actually throwing at the field or the course. So I'm going to do another 10 to 12 reps here. And again, thumbs are down, rotated down, and I'm working my way up progressively as I go through the reps. I'm going to end around chin to nose height, which is going to be the highest level of shoulder activation and stretch towards the end of the motion. Okay, exercise number 13 is going to be ankle knee hulas. At least that's what I call them because it looks like we're doing a hula hoop and it's rotating and stretching our ankle and knee joints a little bit. So I like to get into a nice stance right about hip width. So my legs are pretty much straight up and down, and I'm on the ball of the foot and a slight knee bend. And really what I'm doing is I'm moving my knees around in a nice smooth circular motion, which is moving my ankle through a more rotational range of motion, as well as getting my meniscus a little bit warmed up, because the meniscus actually articulates a little bit, or at least it allows the femur and tibia to articulate a little bit around it. So this is going to help kind of get our knee joint moving correctly. but also it's going to get us a little bit through a more dynamic ankle range of motion, especially to the left and the right as we move through that hula hoop motion. And I rotated myself so you can kind of see a side view of what this looks like. So again, I'm allowing my hips to drop down and I'm kind of squatting down into a nice hula hoop motion, feeling a really comprehensive stretch all the way around the feet, ankles, as well as allowing the knees to articulate around very smoothly. And this one is going to be 10 reps per side. So I'm going to do 10 reps on the clockwise direction and then 10 reps on the counterclockwise direction as viewed downwards at your own feet. Okay, and our last exercise, number 14, is what I call relaxed trunk rotations. Now, what this one's going to do for us is it's going to move our trunk and lower body through a full dynamic stretch rotationally to prepare it for the demands of the disc golf throw. But also neurologically, it's going to help to ingrain good spinal centering habits as we rotate around. So what I'm doing is I'm getting into a nice wide stance like I would be during an X step when I plant. Sort of think about if you were playing basketball. You'd want to have your feet fairly spread apart so that you can move left or right very easily. And you want to have a nice athletic bent knee, bent hips position so that you can move forward or backwards or even jump up and down very quickly. So you want to be in a nice athletic stance here with your feet pointed straight forward. And then what I'm going to do once I get in that athletic stance is I'm tilting my spine forward in such a manner that is similar to my natural release. So it's going to be just a slight forward spine tilt so that I'm in a nice balanced defensive, we'll call it a basketball defense position. And then I'm going to go into my rotations, which I'm going to do 10 for this spine position. And I'm trying to stay very relaxed, but also balanced at the same time. So I don't want to like blow over my center of mass past each foot. And what helps me with this is I like to imagine my opposite shoulder blade is moving towards the opposite direction. So when I start off the movement, right from the center here, I'm pulling the shoulder blade on this side, which is my right shoulder blade, the left from our viewpoint, but it's my right shoulder blade. I'm pulling it in this direction around my back. And that's essentially I'm pulling my opposite shoulder blade towards the opposite direction. That helps keep my spine somewhat centered. You can see there's a little bit of a natural tilt that happens, which is actually similar to the tilted spiral that happens when we have a good brace on a backhand throw, so that's perfectly fine. So I do my 10 reps, and then I drop deeper into my hyzer position. So I'm more bent forward and I'm a little bit more squatted down. And I'm doing the same thing, nice and relaxed, moving through a full range of motion, feeling the stretch when I hit each side of the rotation. Do my 10 reps there. And then the hardest one, which is the Anheuser spine angle. So my hips are a little bit more forward, but I'm still, with my center of mass, balanced between my insteps and over my midfoot. So I'm not falling behind my heels because I'm moving the hips forward and pulling the back backwards. And this one is the hardest, so it doesn't have to be super aggressive. And I'm doing another 10 reps here. You can see I'm still struggling a little bit, even though I've done these for quite a few months now. So very good warm-up exercise. And that will finish our preparations. And then, of course, after we do that, we'd want to go through a nice, prudent and smooth progression of throws once we got to the field of the course, so that we're not going straight into full power shots. Because our body and mind are prepared for the throwing, but we still want to work our way up to make sure we're as safe as possible and also as effective as possible.